Hello, everyone. This is Written in the Stars, and today, in building a zodiac sign based fantasy world, we are going to look at the geography of our fantasy world. Because I haven't done such a huge world building project before, I am using a world building checklist. The one I'm using is from Quill and Steel. I'm going to link it in the info box below. For the geography section, Quill and Steel lists the following things to look out for, which is landscape and terrain, climate and weather, natural resources, flora and fauna, as well as natural disasters. And today we are going to look at the landscape and terrain. The general idea is to have 12 continents that correspond to each zodiac sign. However, I would find it interesting to have some minor continents, maybe, or just like smaller countries with different zodiac sign combinations. One could be for the elements, where fire signs are mixed, where they're like Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius. One could be of mixed modality, so it could be like fixed modality for the signs Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, or Aquarius. And polar signs are also an option. For example, having Aries and Libra being mixed into one continent, or also the signs that have the same rulership. For example, having Mars as rulership would be Aries and Scorpio, so having a continent that is kind of Aries and Scorpio based. The reasoning behind this would be the magic system. The world consists of metaphysical magical threads, 12 of them for each zodiac sign, but they are woven into each other. And depending on how many threads there are, how dominant one or maybe two threads are, certain magic is accessible, it shapes the landscape and like just the world in general. And like one continent could have just like dominant Mars threads, which would be an Aries thread and a Scorpio thread. And even when looking at the continents, which are just based on one zodiac sign, we can take into consideration their element, modality, rulership, and the general meaning of the sign, which combines the element, modality, and rulership considerations. For the landscape and also the climate, which I might talk about in the next video on building my world, it is interesting to know the philosophical meanings of them. So, for Aristotle, the fire element was hot and dry, the air element hot and wet, water was cold and wet, and earth cold and dry. And it's just such a cool way to like combine it with weather and like landscape considerations. For example, a desert, which is naturally hot and dry. Like there are cold deserts as well, but the one we're usually thinking about is hot and dry, would definitely belong to the fire element. So fire signs would contain a desert landscape. There are other attributions to the element in this way, not just the ones from Aristotle. Aristotle also has one like primary element, so the fire element is primarily hot, the air one primarily wet, the water one primarily cold, and the earth one primarily dry. However, the Stoics used it a little bit differently and switched the air and water elements, so air is cold and water is wet. However, I really like the like double combination from Aristotle, so this is the one I'm gonna use in my considerations for building this world. The next consideration is the modality, and we have cardinal, fixed, and mutable modality. It's most interesting maybe for the weather, but even for the landscape, it might work. So, cardinal signs begin a season, fixed signs sustain a season, and mutable signs change from one season into the next. And with this, we could like consider how changeable the continent is. For example, the cardinal sign Aries, which is a fire element, so it's hot, could contain volcanoes, which just like suddenly erupt, which fits into the kind of beginning a season type where, like, for example, spring, it just like suddenly gets warmer, like the heat just suddenly rises up, and like Aries is associated with the beginning of spring. So having like sudden volcanic eruptions that kind of create more heat in on the continent could be a fun way to play with this. And lastly, the rulership could also be considered in creating this. So, Venus, for example, is all about balance and harmony, while Mars is about conflict and war. So, the landscape for the Venus continents could be more harmonious, just like very comfortable. It has all the resources, while for Mars, it could have just like limited resources that makes a lot of fights necessary for people to survive. The landscape could be more hostile. There could be like dangerous beasts, stuff like that. With these consideration, I looked at the biomes of our world to get some idea of what matches with which zodiac sign. First up, we have a polar region, which is generally cold and dry. And cold and dry, most of all, fits the Earth signs. But due to just their general significations, I feel like Capricorn and Scorpio fit quite well. Polar regions also have a lot of snow and ice, which I think matches the fixed water sign of Scorpio, because like fixed water basically is ice. And to me, Capricorn has the most like cold and dry feeling out of the earth signs, whereas like Taurus and Virgo are a little bit more feeling more like fertile ground, while as Capricorn feels more this kind of cold and dry rock mountainous landscape kind of feeling. Next up, there's like high mountains landscape with cold mountain tops and a more mild and fertile climate with forests and meadows in the valleys below. And this clearly fits the earth signs. So, um, Capricorn could be like more considered on top of the mountains, while Taurus and Virgo could be in the forests and meadows in the valleys. And so the landscape there on the continents for Capricorn, Taurus, and Virgo could fit this high mountain biome. Next up, we have Mediterranean climate or biome, which consists of dry summers, which often creates fires, but it has rainfall in winter and it's often found in coastal regions. And this one was by far the most difficult to match because of the like dry summers. I feel like Aries and Sagittarius would fit quite well. I wouldn't give it to Leo because Leo is a fixed sign, so it would have like more like fixed climate and would likely be dry and hot all year round. Then for the rainfall in winter, which winter is cold and wet, it could be water signs like Cancer and Pisces. I did not include Scorpio for the same reason as Leo, that it is a fixed sign and that the cold and wet kind of climate energy for Scorpio would be more suited to some like icy landscape. And because I think I read somewhere that the Mediterranean kind of climate biome is where a lot of like civilizations sprung up, so it would be a little bit more fertile. I also choose to match it with Taurus and Virgo, so this kind of biome could be in any of those signs. Next up, we have the desert, which is dry and can be hot or cold. Now, for the hot desert, any fire sign, I think it matches. One that matches the most, I think, is Leo because of its just fixed nature. But then for the cold desert, I think Capricorn also matches quite well because it just again is this very harsh landscape. The savanna has a long dry season and a short rain season, and mostly I think for the long dry season, it matches the um, fire signs, Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius. For the short rain season, it could also like slip into the air signs a little bit. So the air signs could also have some part savanna. Then we have the tropical rainforest, which has like evergreen forests, is high in temperature and has lots of rain. So heat and wet is for the air signs. So all air signs could match. However, I think Aquarius and Gemini would match a little bit better due to the not so harmonious nature. Libra is associated with harmony, and a tropical rainforest seems kind of harsh to me. They have a lot of like storms that fit better for Gemini and for Aquarius. Then we have the temperate forest, which has moderate climate, is moderately wet, and has different types of trees. And for this one, a lot of fit as well. So because of the like different flora and fauna, the different trees, I think Taurus and Virgo would be nice. They're earth signs. So something with like a lot of trees, this lush with forests and plants is very good for these two signs. Then because of the association with it being moderately wet, Cancer and Pisces also fit quite well because they're water signs. Again, Scorpio is excluded because it's more harsh and more icy. And I also think Gemini would fit. I think Gemini could like have different biomes that are very different in nature. And then for Libra, it fits because of the kind of more moderate climate, moderate like rainfall. It's just very moderate and it fits with the harmonious nature of Libra. Next up, we have the steppe, which is fertile grassland that is hot in summer but cold in winter and generally dry. And because it's hot in summer but also dry, it kind of fits the fire signs. And because it is cold in winter but also dry, it fits the earth signs as well. Then we have the Boreal Forest or Taiga, which has evergreen trees, is cool in summer and long and cold in winter, and it's generally dry. So because it's like generally very cold and also dry, it fits the earth signs based on like Aristotle's classification. And I also would include Scorpio because while being a wet sign, it is a little bit more harsh and just like again there is snow possible, like there's a lot of snow usually, and it just fits with Scorpio in that way. And lastly, we have the tundra, which is cool in summer, cold in winter, and very dry. So again, it fits the earth signs in general. However, because it's really, really harsh and very, very cold, I think Capricorn again would be the best. And because there's also snow and ice, Scorpio would also be possible. So these were all the biomes that I could find in book I ordered for it. And here, like you can pause and just look at it. This again is like where I would classify it as. Then I also arranged it per sign so you can see here. So I can have a little bit of a cheat sheet to look at when I'm going about planning each of the continents in more detail. But this is kind of what I could orientate myself at. I also looked at some other videos, specifically those of the World Building Corner, which also outlines the biomes but a little bit differently. The subtropical zone itself has a humid and a monsoon zone, or can be divided into this. So the humid one has no dry season, and the monsoon has a dry winter, but both have hot summers, and they are the hottest in the temperate zone. The rainfalls peak in summer, and they have like localized storms with lots of wind, sudden temperature changes, and like cyclones over the oceans, extreme weather. but they do have seasons, and I think the air signs would also fit quite well for this, especially Aquarius and Gemini, due to lots of wind and them having like localized storms, especially Aquarius. Then there's also wetlands, which are waterlogged areas that are kind of transitional zones between land and sea. And this is marshes, swamps, and peatland. And in general, I think this obviously fits the water signs, like especially like marshes fit like Scorpio and swamps, I think. But I think it also fits with Virgo. There could be like I think in peatland there's a lot of like mineral rich like clay and mud and stuff like that. And like Virgo could use it to heal. So this could be part of Virgo as well. Then there's oceanic or marine climate, which has like really tall trees, evergreens, and there's like marine west coast climate, which is has no dry season but warm summers, and subpolar oceanic climate, which has no dry season but a cold summer. But I think just in general, because of its association with bodies of water, it could be just water sign based, like it could have to do with the water signs. Because of like having tall trees and being evergreen, it could also be earth signs. So again, here I listed it, and you can like pause if you want to. I'm not gonna hover over this too much. And I added the ones in the division for the different signs. And now I'm just gonna look at the different signs and see what kind of fits the best. So for Aries and the first fire sign, I think having like volcanic islands, which also on them contain like a little bit of desert, a little bit of savanna and steppe. So this could be great. There could be like smaller islands which have a lot of volcanoes, and then like some kind of mainlands with more desert and savanna and steppe area. Leo, I think I would like term it the golden desert. It has like obviously deserts, but also savanna and steppe. And the golden comes from like the light association with Leo and the sun. And then Sagittarius, we could like have the eternal savanna or steppes, which would be very vast. Like the Sagittarius continent would be very vast, like where a lot of kind of nomadic tribes could be traveling. And it could also have some Mediterranean climate. Then for the air signs with Gemini, which I would give floating islands, and each island, like they're swirling around in kind of a changing wind, and they're like changing directions, the islands, and in a kind of maybe like rhythm, and each like island could have its own ecosystem. So some could be more rainforest, some could be more temperate forest. And yeah, that I think that would be really cool. It would fit the kind of changeable nature of Gemini very well. Then Libra, I think it would be cool to have kind of like a swing island. So maybe like an island that is perched on like rocks that are laid on top of each other, and it kind of just like sways and shakes a little bit. And if like the people on the continent like build too much on either side, like it could topple over. And so there's like this kind of constant danger that has like creates the need for them to like be harmonious and get along with each other. I'm not 100% sold on this because I think it's a little bit crazy idea of having such an environment, but I also kind of like it. And then for Aquarius, oh, and for Libra, I think I would just, in general, the temperature, the climate, I would have it be very just moderate and just very harmonious. They could also have like a lot of like gardens which are tended to very well, which like them creating like sculptures from bushes, whatever. And then Aquarius, I think I would have an electric rainforest, where like clans could like store or they could like conduct electricity. I think that would be really cool. And then like having like thunderstorms and like lightning and then like lightning crashing into maybe like a tree that can conduct electricity and it just like sizzles through the tree and then the people that live there can like build off of that kind of natural electricity because like Aquarius is associated with technology and I like because of this they could be very advanced maybe. So then for the water signs for Cancer, I would deem it like the flowing land, which would be like the homeland, but them also having like kind of islands. But the homeland would have like many lakes, rivers, and coasts. It would also be very moderate, so it could just like have temperate forests, but it would also be just very lush in vegetation. But the most like striking feature would be like its coastal regions as well as its many rivers and lakes. And I think what would be kind of cool is to have like this huge mountain that is kind of hollow on top or like hollowed out so that there's like a big lake on top of that mountain. And when it like overflows, it creates even more like lakes and rivers that like stream down from it. Then Scorpio, it would be like very cold. It could have like polar and tundra regions, a cold desert and steppe, but I think it would also veer into marshes and swamps. I think marshes and swamps would be like have this kind of mysterious note to it and it also could have subarctic and tiger and I think these kind of varied regions would also be like connected through like an underground labyrinth that just naturally is there from like the beginning of like humanity. Something else could have created it and could be very mysterious. For Pisces, I would do something similar as with Gemini, but have it be like islands that are like in the water, and I think what would be cool is like there would be like a kind of swirling, like vortex like thing that carries the islands around and shifts them. And they could also have very different ecosystems. And one feature would also be that they're kind of like often covered in like mist due to the kind of also mysterious like nature of Pisces, the kind of spiritual nature, the mist like carries like visions or something like that. Then for the earth signs, I have Taurus and I would call it like the rolling hills or something like that. Just very like comfortable hills, maybe some mountains, but they're not like too ragged, they're not too dangerous. Then like forests and fertile farmland. The continent could be very big and a lot of people could like settle there. They could be mostly farmers and like just there would be a lot of lush vegetation and a lot of things growing there. And land Virgo, it could also have mountains. It could have more like wetlands as well, like marshes and peatlands and like forest with many herbs. And like Virgo could use all the kind of different stuff. So rocks from the mountains, then the clay from like peatland and stuff, and then for the wood from the forest or the herbs to just kind of create stuff for healing, for practical purposes. They would be like a very kind of creative bunch insofar that they just like create a lot of useful things. And then Capricorn could be like really perilous mountains, really ragged, difficult to live in. It could have subarctic and taiga and tundra. It could have a polar region, a cold steppe or desert, and there could be just like the cities inside the mountains. And yeah, I think it would be very harsh. Not too many plants growing there, again, being kind of a necessity for creating different like groups, like Capricorn being split into groups, and then each group having this like very strong hierarchy with a strong leader to tell them what to do so they can survive. And because I don't want each continent to be just a one thing, like I don't want Leo to just be desert all over the place, and I do want to have it have some variety. I think what would be cool, like because the world kind of is based on these magical threads, it would be reasonable that the Aries continent does have the most Aries thread. But within those, other threads are woven into. I explained it before in this video, but I'm just gonna say it again. So the Aries threads are woven into other continent, and so the source of energy of magic for this continent is like kind of the thread that is like the most dominant on a continent, and this is what creates the magic. But there are other kind of threads woven into that create like variety on landscape. For example, if there are like some Taurus threads in the Aries continent and they kind of come forth, then this kind of part of the a volcanic island could be more lush in vegetation, it could be more farmland like. In general, it would veer a little bit more towards what I already chose for the Taurus continent. So it would shift towards that. So yeah, here again, for like um putting Aries in the middle as like the continent, if there are other like fire threads, it would still be like hot and dry. But if there would be like earth threads, it would kind of cool it a little bit. The air would become more cold. Then for water, it generally would be more cold and wet. And then for air, it would be more hot and wet. So it would kind of pull the landscape a little bit in the direction of this other element and kind of create more of a varied landscape and kind of change up the landscape a little. So this is it for my zodiac world considerations for the biomes and the landscape. And just let me know in the comments what you think about it. Which idea did you like the most? Did you think all of them fit the zodiac signs? And if you liked it, you could just leave a like. And if you want to follow me more in this world building process, or want to watch some of my other more astrology focused videos, which explain astrology through storytelling, you could also subscribe and follow me along on this journey. And if you want to watch the first video where I explain the concept that I follow while creating this world, you can just watch this video.